I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Wednesday, April the 29th, brought to you in part by Performance Livestock Analytics. With real-time access from anywhere, the easy-to-use platform simplifies everything from feeding to financials. Critical infrastructure. That's what President Trump deemed the meatpacking industry across this country as critical infrastructure, allowing him to implement the Defense Production Act, which goes all the way back to the Korean War, and now he can make policy to keep those plants open. And you're thinking, well, how's he going to do that? The plant workers won't come into work, and some of them are sick, and some of them are scared, and some of them have been told to stay home by the unions, and some of them are just lazy, and they kind of like all this free money that they're getting everywhere from unemployment, and then bonuses that come on top of the unemployment, and then stimulus checks and everything that goes with. But now we're going to see how we can keep these plants open. And some of these governors have already made statements since President Trump made the announcements of the Defense Production Act coming out. Some of these governors in those states where they have a lot of packing plants have come out and said, yeah, you guys, basically, if you're not sick or dead, you need to be getting to work, or it could threaten some of your benefits, including unemployment and including some of your stimulus things. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work, but they're telling people to get to work, just like if we were in war. And from the very beginning of this coronavirus, you remember President Trump has said that we are really in a war, and that we were going to do everything it took to win. Well, this is just part of it. We've got to feed this country, and we've got to keep our infrastructure of agriculture in place, and that includes all of our farmers and ranchers, and we've got to get these packing plants open as much as we can to continue to move this product through the system. And you know, these packers, their good faith in this whole Defense Production Act, you know, needless to say, will have probably a lot to do with what becomes of these investigations, starting with the Holcomb fire, with PNS doing the investigation, all the way to the continued investigation, look into it with the DOJ. Now, it depends on how they act. Now, your packers, they're pretty quiet. They haven't said anything. Of course, nobody's really asked them about all this money that they're making right now, about the price gouging that they're doing, that they're more than doubling their money on these cattle. Maybe not so much on the hogs, but or the chickens, but definitely on the beef. They're more than doubling their money. We had one of our major packers come out with an ad campaign earlier in the week, which seemed to me kind of self-serving, as they added to the panic buying, taking out full-page ads in major newspapers and telling people that a protein shortage was coming. Did we really need to do that? And then there's been also reports that they've told other entities that they've got a lot of frozen beef lined up, and meats of all kinds, and that they will be all right. Why would they come out with the ad campaign warning people of protein shortages, if not to spark panic buying and continued purchasing of these lofty prices that they're gouged with? But we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the report, how much they're getting. But we're just having trouble keeping these packing plants open, and everything from your poultry, your pork, and up into your beef. But they keep talking about how these packing plants are hot spots for the COVID-19. Why are they hot spots? Because they've got these triage units outside testing everybody. If we tested everybody in any kind of an industry, we're going to find a lot more positives in there. And that's just, this evident. If you can't see that, the more people we test, the more people we find with positives. And that's been said in a lot of places all over the country. And I saw a post that happened sometime early in the week that marked a lot of cities that had a higher percentage rise in positive cases. And if you looked at them, almost all the cities were where they had a major meat packing plant, including Amarillo, Texas was on there. And I live 10 miles from Amarillo, Texas. It's not a complete crisis there. Of course, I guess it is for some people that might be affected, but it's no worse than anywhere else I've been. But the more testing you do, the more positives you're going to have. And we're finding out that this virus is not as deadly as we thought, if you figure it percentage-wise, and all the people that's actually had it and didn't even realize that they'd had it, or maybe they're just a carrier. But this still is going to be interesting to watch. This has got to help some, because basically those packing plants have to do everything they can to stay open. And you would think that they would be anyway because of these monster profits that they're getting, but they don't have to hurry. They know they're going to get them anyway. We've talked about the destroying or euthanizing livestock. There's been a lot of chickens and a lot of hogs been euthanized, and I haven't heard any finished cattle yet being euthanized that are healthy and ready to go. But I did have a friend of mine tell me that that in the Southern Plains he was involved with putting some kind of instructions together, I guess you would say. The last time that we had a threat of the hoof and mouth coming out, it was what would we do with all these animals if we had to euthanize them? What would we do with the carcasses? What's the plan? How would you dispose of them and all that kind of thing? He said they've dug those out and they're kind of dusting them off and looking at them to see how they would do it. And you think, well, how in the heck could they just euthanize something that's still worth $1,300 a head? You wouldn't think they'd be doing it. You'd think that there'd be a lot of backyard butchers that come out of the woodwork and pull up there with their trailer and be glad to take one off their hands. But like he said, how are you going to get rid of 5 or 10,000 of them a day if we can't keep these packing plants open? And I realize they continue to get heavier all the time. A fat cattle auction up in the Northern Plains, Stockman's Livestock in Yankton, they had some of those big, heavy cattle that some of these farmer feeders have been hanging on to. They didn't like the price 2 months ago, they didn't like it a month ago, and it's just continued to get worse. And some of them are coming in every week. But he sold mixed steers there weighing 1655 at 89.50. I don't think I'd be volunteering to euthanize that animal quite yet. I think I'd just soon put that one in my pocket. But his typical weights of fat cattle we're bringing from 90 to 98.50. Not a whole lot different than what we're seeing in the country, but probably selling as many head there at that individual sale barn as what we've seen sell much in the country so far. But I tell you what, it's going to be interesting to see what we're going to do here. But we've got April here, and it's not converging with our fat cattle market. Even though our fat cattle market has been going down like a rock, your April live cattle, the latest established on Tuesday afternoon was 85.5 about, and the latest sales we've had of finished fat cattle in the country from 93 to 95. As I mentioned at Yankton there, they had it from 90 to 98.50. We've actually seen deliveries tendered. 30 loads of them, or 30 contracts tendered for Amarillo, and you think, well, why in the heck would they want to deliver cattle when it costs $1 or $2 a hundred anyway to deliver those cattle, and you're only going to get 85.5? And well, a lot has to be set. How are you going to get those scheduled for kill? Maybe you'd rather take the 85.5 than hang on to them for another 6 weeks looking for a kill date. And then you look at the June board and it's underneath April. Maybe they just as soon take that. It's kind of like your oil here last week whenever it finished with a negative number. Nobody really wants to take delivery of that. There's no way anybody else can get them scheduled. If they do end up somebody taking delivery of those cattle, that they would probably take slaughter delivery. You only take live delivery when you think the market's coming back in a hurry, and then you put them back on feed, and a lot of them don't go on feed real well right after that, and then you bring them back at a heavier weight and try to make some money on them. But if they take the delivery at slaughter, how are they going to get that scheduled in? These stockyards that take live delivery, they've got to make room for them, and I assume the packing plants have to make room for them too. And you think, well, wouldn't it be a packer taking delivery? Packers would have to take a long position on the live cattle futures to be able to get delivery, and they're not going to want to do that. They never want to do anything that's going to support the market at all. Be interesting to see how that works out. But let's look at your futures on Tuesday. Your April live cattle futures up 72 cents, like I said, at 85.52. June was up 65 cents at 84.70. You go on out from there, your out fronts were up 2 cents to 80 cents. April feeder cattle futures down 77 at 119.62. May was up 35 cents at 118.50. You go on out front on your feeder cattle futures, and they were up 47 cents to up $1. Your fat cattle trade, we saw a little bit of trade on Monday at $1, and it was one of your packers that's kind of trying to save face and be kind of a good soldier out there. We had some of your other ones come in here on Tuesday, some regionals and those, and they're not under as much heat as some of your major packers. They're going to try to buy them as cheap as they can, and you can't blame them for that. But Iowa had about 2,300 head confirmed. They've actually had about 7,000 confirmed already this week. Nebraska, about 3,000 confirmed on Tuesday and about 4,600 for the week. But your live sales in the Northern Plains up there, 93 to 95. And we had some 95 there late last week, so that's not a ton lower. Your dress trade's at 150, and I would say your dressed trade has been established at 150 dressed there. But you wonder, what in the world could we do? We could get this minimum negotiated cash trade implemented. I know there's a lot of things swirling out there. Everybody's wanting to take advantage of this, and like they say, you don't want to waste a good crisis, but we're trying to get a lot of things implemented here. We're still working on this minimum negotiated 30% cash trade by your major packing plants, not just in an area and not just the packers themselves, but their individual facilities within a 14-day delivery period. We've got nearly 4,000 signatures from outfits, not individuals, but outfits that are affected by this, and we'd sure like to get that pushed through. Just getting this Defense Production Act pushed through. We know that if we get to the right people, and that was ag senators that went to President Trump and got that implemented. We know if we get to the right ones, we can get some of these things done. And we've got to strike while the iron's hot. But your Fed Cattle Exchange, which would be a cash sale, so if we got the 3014 implemented, your packers would likely come into something like the Fed Cattle Exchange and come into brick and mortar auctions and try to buy more cattle that way, because that's a negotiated cash sale there. But Fed Cattle Exchange is expecting 4,100 head, or they're going to be offering that, a little more than that. Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock, you can go on to Fed Cattle Exchange website and watch that timed auction on there. A lot of formula guys are on there. A lot of your feedlots that typically sell formula, maybe because most of your packers have come out and said a lot of these formula cattle they're not going to be able to pick up. So I guess they've got to do something with them. But look at your box beef cutouts, and they just continue to go into the stratosphere, and I've run out of superlatives to talk about your box beef cutout value market. This is the price that packers are charging their buyers for dressed meat, and it's not one lump of meat. It's all the individual cuts, the different movements on all the different individual cuts, and then the price on those totaled up. It's a composite value there for the whole carcass. At Choice Cuts, $330.82. That's $330.82 per hundredweight for a dressed choice carcass at that was up almost $19 again. It's unbelievable. I don't know how much balls they have and how high they want to take it. If we get a true investigation and we look at this, they are going to get huge penalties, guys. I mean, giant penalties. If they can find the person that makes these decisions, they could get jail time for price gouging. That is a serious, serious deal when you're in the middle of a crisis. But they're working with the government here to try to get some of these things done, and I'm sure they're going to make some kind of a deal to get out of it. But it's unbelievable how much money they're making here, and nobody with any gall at all would do it, knowing that people can see how much money they're making. Your select cuts, $320.88, up over $22. It's just unbelievable. And so that's almost $10 choice select spread and almost 100 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. And we're going to do some cowboy math here once again, and it just gets unbelievable every time we take a look at it. But you look at those prices for your box beef cutout values. You take those times your average of your nationwide grading, and then you come out with those figures there. Add them all up, and this is what your average dressed steer or average load of dressed steers would be worth on a dress basis, $328. But we just said they're selling them for $150. That's not double, and that's not just a little more than double. That is a hell of a lot more than double. $328 dressed. I mean, just unbelievable. You figure that times the average dressing percent there at 63.5 gets you to a live price of $209. The highest that fat cattle have ever been in the history of the world was during the 2014 rally there, and they got up to $172. But if you figure it back to the equivalent of what your box beef cutout values are bringing, live fat cattle should be bringing $209 live, $2.09 a pound live. You take that times a 1,400 pound steer, you get a profit for these packers of $1,621 per head profit. And you say, well, they can't run those packing plants for free. I realize that. Let's give them the $89 a head drop value. They're killing 4,000 or 5,000 of them a day there when they can run them. Half that if they can't get their workers to show up. They ought to be able to kill them for that much, nearly $100 a head. Or they could give back a few more morsels of that $1,621 profit. But likely not to happen unless somebody forces them to negotiate on the sales that minimum amount of sales that they buy of these fat cattle, or we bust up the monopoly or do something to keep our cattle producers in business. Your slaughter continues to be disappointing. It's likely going to be under 450,000 for the week. Through Tuesday, only 153,000. That's 17,000 down from the previous week and 88,000 less than the same week a year ago. Let's look at your feeder cattle market, your real-time index on DV auction there late on Tuesday at 119.80. That was actually up 66 cents as we had some pretty stout sales on Tuesday. But let's look at some of your sales. Ozarks Regional Stockyard in West Plains, Missouri. My buddy there, he called the market feeders unevenly steady to $4 higher, but higher mostly on the heifers, your feeder heifers. But peewee calves there, Dan Hill called those $3 to $10 higher on peewees, and I'm talking like under 450 pounds. They get a lot of those little crossbred with a lot of continental breeding in them, weighing under 450 there if you guys would like some of those to turn out this summer. But 3 to 10 higher, and you see why. But some of those middleweight cattle sold awful good. And you look at this one quote from West Plains, 72 head, 687 pound steers, bring $138. Fredonia, Kansas. My buddy Brad Hahn there and all of his workers and family right there, they had a hell of a sale in Fredonia, Kansas there. Look at these steer strings that I pulled out of Cattle Market Central there, and they were all pretty darn good, all these load lots and bigger. But the stick out deal for me is likely the biggest draft of cattle we've seen for many, many weeks, and we'll likely see for many, many more weeks. But right there in Fredonia, Kansas, 381 head of mixed steers, weighed 806 pounds at $118.50. That's a pretty good deal right there for that guy. He wouldn't have been able to get near that in the country. This Friday, they'll turn in country bids in sales, you know, down 105, 106, maybe 108. But bringing a big long string of cattle through the ring right there, putting them in front of the buyers and letting them bid on them until they were done. That's the way auctions work, guys, and we just need more of it. But the best market that I saw anywhere on Tuesday was up in South Dakota. My friends at Christensen's at Kimball Livestock Exchange in Kimball, South Dakota. Your prices were mostly higher. You see this market report. This is the only place you'll find a market report like this out of Kimball Livestock Exchange, even though they've got a hell of a market and get a big runs there. Over 3,000, or several over 3,000 head of cattle there. But look at your popular weights of steers. 500 head of 7-weight steers there, average 776 at 137.96 on the weighted average price. On your 8-weight steers, 427 head of them, averaged 855 at 125.53 on the average. And look at these 9-weights, 759 head of 9-weight steers, average 928 at 121.19, including this big long string of big heavy steers. 240 head of them weighed 918 at 124.10. And that's your feeder flash for Wednesday.